I'm a 19-year-old woman, and this story starts when I was 6, though I didn't understand the full picture until much later. My mom died in a car crash. Instant, no hospital, no goodbye. There was no father in the picture, and no one from my dad's side ever came forward. My mom had one sibling, my Aunt Lenora, who ended up taking me in. I was told she stepped up so I wouldn't go into foster care. At the time, I thought she was saving me. She signed the paperwork, let me move into her house, and I guess that was that. Everyone made it sound like some touching family reunion, but I remember the first night I stayed there. She put me in a laundry room. No bed, just a mattress on the floor next to a stack of detergent bottles and a boiler that made hissing sounds all night. She said it was just for now. That just for now lasted 12 years. Lenora had 3 kids of her own, 1 older than me, 2 younger. Their bedrooms had beds with headboards and night lights and bookshelves. Mine had mildew and a draft. I wasn't allowed to walk into the living room unless I was cleaning it. Same with the kitchen. If I was in there without a broom or dish sponge in hand, I got yelled at. They didn't say I wasn't family, but everything they did made it obvious. When I was about 7, a social worker used to visit every month. I remember the difference. Lenora would comb my hair, put me in clean clothes, smile like we were best friends. The house would be spotless. Her voice would change, soft, patient, sugary sweet. Once the social worker left, the whole act dropped. Back to chores, silence, cold dinners. After about 2 years, those visits stopped. That's when it got worse. I was never allowed to eat meals with them. I'd stand in the hallway and wait. When they were done, I'd scrape together what was left. Sometimes it was crusts or half-eaten bits of food. If they ordered out, I was told to just make something simple. If there was no leftovers, I didn't eat. On birthdays, my cousins had balloons and cakes and new phones. I got a $5 t-shirt from Walmart every single year. Same gift, different color, still had the price tag on it. By the time I was 10, I had to do all the deep cleaning, scrubbing baseboards, cleaning out gutters, even resealing the garage floor once. If I didn't finish something, she'd lock up the food cabinet until the job's done. No one called it abuse. Everyone saw her as the aunt who took in her dead sister's kid. No one asked questions. At school, I'd be exhausted. One teacher asked Lenora about it during a parent conference. I found out because I had to deep clean the entire house with a toothbrush the next day. At 13, I babysat a neighbor's kid, sometimes a tutor classmate, after school. I secretly opened a bank account using my school ID and started saving what little money I could. I didn't spend a cent. Just tucked it away. At 14, something clicked. I overheard her bragging on the phone about her tax breaks and extra support since she took in a child. I asked my school counselor how adoption assistance worked, pretending it was for a project. Turns out, adoptive parents get a monthly check, food support, and other benefits until the kid turns 18. She was cashing in on me. That was the moment I stopped calling her Aunt Lenora in my head. From that point, I started keeping records. Everything. Screenshots of texts where she'd threatened to withhold meals, photos of my chore lists, voice memos where she'd say things like, "You're not my real kid, don't forget that." Even medical records from a clinic that once noted underweight concerns and possible signs of neglect. I didn't know what I'd do with it all yet, but I knew I had to have proof. It wasn't enough to escape, I wanted her exposed. Her youngest daughter, Lainey, was 10 when things started shifting. Lainey started getting the same treatment I had. Her older siblings were out of the house by then, and suddenly Lenora had a new problem child to control. She'd yell at her over tiny things, cut meals short, leave her alone for hours with strict rules on what not to touch or eat. Lainey once snuck me a drawing she made of herself crying in the laundry room. That was it. I knew I had to do something, not just for me, but for her too. The day I turned 18, I packed everything. Every printed screenshot, every audio file, every photo. I walked out without a word. I had already been in contact with a youth advocacy center for months. They connected me with a pro bono lawyer. I didn't just want freedom. I filed a case that same month, not only exposing the years of neglect and financial exploitation, but pushing for emergency custody of Lainey. I wasn't sure if the court would take me seriously, but I had documents, witnesses, even my school counselor on board. That was just the start. I turned 18 on a Thursday. That morning, I packed a suitcase, grabbed my file folder stuffed with evidence, and left while Lenora was out running errands. My ride was already waiting. My sophomore English teacher, MS, Phelps. She had known something was off for years. She never pushed, just quietly offered help when I needed it. The week before my birthday, she helped me sign a short-term lease for a small studio and moved some donated furniture in. Nothing fancy, just enough to get started. By the time Lenora got home and realized I was gone, the adoption checks had already stopped. The government doesn't mess around when someone turns 18. Within a few days, she started blowing up my phone, first with fake concern, then with guilt trips, and finally with threats. She demanded back rent for all the years I lived under her roof. I didn't answer. I blocked her after the 3rd voicemail where she said I owed her everything. 2 weeks later, I got a text from my younger cousin, one of the few who still had my number. She said that Callie, the youngest, had been moved into the laundry room. Same mattress, same rules. That was all she wrote. No emojis, no follow-up, just facts. I sent Lenora a message. Not emotional, not long. I just asked why Callie was in the laundry room now. The reply came almost immediately. Maybe she'll learn to be as ungrateful as you. I screenshot it and added it to the folder. I'd already been in touch with a legal nonprofit that focuses on neglected youth. I brought the folder to their office and met with Mallory, a volunteer attorney who handled cases like mine. I showed her everything, texts, photos, call logs, even a short video I'd taken of the kitchen lockbox Lenora used to keep food behind a padlock. Mallory barely blinked. She'd seen worse, she said. But what stood out was how long I'd been collecting everything. That made it easier to prove a pattern. She moved fast. Within a few days, she filed an emergency petition requesting a home welfare check for the minor still living with Lenora. Child Protective Services visited the house within the week. That same night, Lenora found a way to call me from a different number. She was screaming so loud the voicemail cut in and out, accused me of trying to ruin her life, threatened lawsuits, said I'd regret this. I didn't respond. I just saved the voicemail and sent it to Mallory. The CPS visit uncovered a lot. Unsafe sleeping arrangements, limited food access, excessive chores that weren't age appropriate. The two older kids lied, probably coached. They said everything was fine and even gave a tour of the house like it was a model home. But Callie broke. She told them she was scared at night, that she missed me, that she didn't understand why she was being punished. Mallory pushed for a court hearing. Family court agreed to schedule one and appointed a guardian ad litem, someone neutral who visits both homes and interviews the people involved to figure out what's best for the child. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was movement. Lenora tried to hit back fast, filed a complaint accusing me of stealing things when I moved out, furniture, kitchen supplies, even a vacuum cleaner. Luckily, I had receipts. Every single thing in my apartment was donated, secondhand, or bought with my own tutoring money. Her complaint was dismissed at the pre-hearing stage. The judge barely looked at it. While all this was going on, I started community college. 3 days a week, early morning classes. I worked part-time at a bookstore near campus. My apartment was tiny, but clean and quiet. As soon as the court allowed the case to move forward, I bought a second-hand twin bed and started rearranging my living area. Took down a tall shelf to make room for a play space. Asked a friend to help install a lock on the front door that wasn't just a flimsy knob. The guardian ad litem visited me last week. We talked at my kitchen table while the dryer hummed in the background. I showed her the apartment, the folder of documents, the photos of Callie and me from before things got bad. She didn't say much, just nodded a lot, wrote notes. She said she'd be visiting Lenora's house next. The hearing is scheduled for the end of the month. Lenora hasn't been able to contact me again. I've changed numbers and added every known relative of hers to a blocked list, just in case. When I walked out of the courtroom after that first pre-hearing, there was no big moment. No cheering, no hug from a lawyer, just silence. But this time it wasn't the silence of someone ignoring me or brushing me aside. It was the kind that means someone else is watching now. Someone with power. And that's a start. The court hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. I got there half an hour early with Mallory, carrying a black folder and a small notebook with my notes. Mallory had coached me on what to expect, how long it might take, what the judge could ask, and what the tone of the room might be. But nothing prepared me for how Lenora showed up. She came in wearing a pale pink skirt suit, pearls around her neck, and makeup like she was walking into a wedding. Her lawyer looked fresh out of a commercial, slick hair, expensive briefcase, and a rehearsed smile. Before the session started, I overheard him using words like character assassination and family unity. He had a whole speech ready about misunderstandings between relatives and fabricated hostility. Lenora nodded along like she'd already won. Mallory didn't say much. She flipped open her binder, organized the tabs, and waited. The hearing began. The judge looked over our files, asked some standard questions, and then gave Mallory the floor. She started by requesting the court admit the text message records into evidence. These weren't just screen captures. Mallory had subpoenaed the actual phone logs through the service provider. Messages from Lenora to both me and Callie were printed and time-stamped. She walked the judge through them one by one. The room stayed quiet until the judge stopped on one text and read it aloud. She'll learn like the other one did. Either serve or starve. You could hear a pin drop. Even the court clerk, who'd seen everything, looked up from her screen. Mallory continued, presenting the guardian ad litem's report next. The language in that report was plain. The guardian described the home as void of emotional warmth, listed specific examples of neglect like no visible affection between adults and children, punitive labor tasks assigned as punishment, and verbal mockery used routinely as discipline. The report also noted that Lenora never once referred to Callie by name during their visit, only as that one or the brat. I had my turn to speak next. I didn't make speeches. I just showed what I had. Printed photographs of Callie's knees bruised from scrubbing floors. Images of the broken chair she had been sleeping on when the mattress got moldy. And cans of food with expiration dates going back 2 years. Every image was date-stamped and pulled directly from my digital cloud account. Mallory had already run metadata checks and submitted verification from a tech consultant who confirmed the photos hadn't been edited or tampered with. Lenora tried to say the photos were fake, that I had photoshopped them, that I set up the shots to make her look bad. But her lawyer didn't seem convinced. When Mallory pointed out the image data had been confirmed by a licensed forensic specialist, Lenora stopped interrupting. Then the guardian ad litem's inspection of my apartment was brought up. They had done a surprise visit a week before the hearing. I found a clean, safe space. I had set up bunk beds against one wall, made a reading corner with books I picked up from the bookstore where I work, and filled the pantry with easy meals Callie liked. I even got a second-hand desk for schoolwork. Mallory showed the court photos from the visit, along with a checklist signed off by the inspector. Everything passed. A new statement was introduced next. A neighbor from Lenora's street had written a letter saying she often heard shouting late at night and had seen Callie taking trash out in freezing weather in socks and no coat. The court accepted the letter, and it was added to the official case file. During questioning, Lenora started cracking. She talked in circles, blamed the system, blamed me, said I was jealous of her perfect family. The judge didn't let it slide. He looked over his glasses and asked her point blank, why would someone be jealous of a mattress in a laundry room? Then came the private moment. The judge asked Callie to speak to him alone, with only the guardian present. It took about 10 minutes. When they returned, Callie didn't look at Lenora. She walked straight toward me and sat beside Mallory. The judge didn't waste time. He said the court found enough evidence to issue a temporary removal of Callie from Lenora's custody. A 90-day placement with me was granted immediately, with scheduled welfare visits. During this time, the court would monitor Callie's adjustment and determine if long-term custody would be in her best interest. Lenora made one last attempt, offering a payment to settle everything quietly. Mallory stood up, handed the court a transcript of that voicemail and a record of the call. The judge added attempted coercion to the official case notes. Lenora's 2 older kids were not removed, but the court ruled they would now be visited weekly by assigned social workers due to patterns of concern. The judge wrapped things up and reminded everyone this was just the beginning of oversight, not the end. After the hearing, I signed Callie out with the court officer. We walked to the bus stop together. She had a small duffel bag and held my hand the entire ride home. When we got off, she looked up at me and asked if she could sleep on the top bunk. I told her yes, and then I told her she'd never sleep on a floor again. 3 weeks after Callie moved in, our place started settling into a rhythm. We had a chart on the fridge with simple routines: breakfast, homework, reading time, dishes. The first few nights were calm until Callie started waking up crying. She'd flinch when a dish clattered too loud or if someone laughed too suddenly in the hallway. One night, she sat up sobbing because she thought she'd get yelled at for breathing wrong. I brought it up with the guardian ad litem, and she fast-tracked Callie into therapy through the court's-approved child trauma program. Weekly sessions, one-on-one, no parent present. The therapist would send progress notes to both the guardian and Mallory. First session, Callie barely said anything, just drew pictures and nodded. But during the second session, the therapist called the guardian that same afternoon. Callie had opened up. She said that when she acted out, Lenora would lock her outside. Not for minutes, for hours. Even in the cold. Sometimes she was made to stand near the trash bins with no shoes on. If she cried, the punishment restarted. She told the therapist her meals were often just toast with ketchup, and she had to hand wash her socks in the bathroom sink because the washer wasn't for kids. The guardian added the new disclosures to her report immediately. Mallory contacted the court that night and pushed for the information to be included before the next custody review. The therapist flagged everything as credible based on Callie's consistency and emotional reactions. Somehow, Lenora found out Callie was talking. 2 days later, she filed a complaint accusing me of mental manipulation and brainwashing. She claimed I had coached Callie into saying things that weren't true and that I was using her against her own mother figure. Her lawyer requested an independent review, which the court approved. They brought in a secondary therapist. Neutral party, not told anything in advance. She visited our apartment, spoke to Callie alone, and ran her own assessments over 3 sessions. Callie didn't know this therapist was part of the case. She just treated it like a new person to talk to, and apparently said the same things. While all this was happening, I got a message from Lena, one of Lenora's older daughters. She's 16. She said she wanted to leave too, that she was scared all the time, and that if she asked for help, Lenora would go full crazy. I saved the message and forwarded it to Mallory. The next day, Lena deleted the whole conversation and denied everything when the guardian called her in for a welfare check. She claimed I was trying to get rid of her whole family. Nothing else came from it, for now. A few days after that, I got called into the front office at my college. Security had flagged a phone call. A woman pretending to be my mother had called in worried about her daughter's mental health and asked for my class schedule. She used my full name, date of birth, and even mentioned one of my professors. The college didn't give her anything but notified me and locked my records with a flag. Mallory immediately filed a no-contact request with the court. While we waited for approval, I installed security cameras in the hallway and by the front door. A friend from school helped me set it up and showed me how to run everything through an app. I didn't tell Callie why. The next supervised visit was hard. Callie went in nervous but calm. The minute she saw Lenora, she froze. Lenora didn't waste time, told Callie she wasn't a real sister to me. Said she was just confused and that once the court gets over its phase, she'd be back home where she belonged. The social worker sat there silently taking notes, but by the end of the visit, Callie was crying and wouldn't hug Lenora goodbye. She clung to my side and didn't speak the whole ride home. The social worker filed it as emotional rejection of biological guardian due to ongoing distress. That night, I called MS Phelps, my old English teacher who helped me move out. She'd raised kids of her own and always seemed steady. I asked her how you're supposed to know if you're doing the right things when nothing feels normal. She told me to stop trying to be perfect and just be consistent. She sent me a link to a parenting support group run through the community center near campus. I went to the group the next week. It was held in a library basement, folding chairs in a circle. People were talking about tantrums, bedwetting, school notes. When it was my turn, I said I was raising my cousin, that she'd been through a lot, that I didn't have a blueprint, but I wanted her to feel safe. I said I was trying to win custody because she was finally sleeping without fear, and I didn't want to lose that. The group leader just nodded and said, "Then let's help you win." A little after midnight, I got a message on my phone from an Instagram account I didn't recognize. The profile had no posts, no name, just a sunflower emoji for the picture. It was Lena. She said she was locked in the garage because she refused to do laundry after Lenora came home from a party. She typed fast, like she was scared someone would see. Said there was no light, no blanket except one she'd stuffed behind some boxes, and the garage door was bolted from the outside. She begged me not to tell anyone official. Said she had a plan. She'd sneak out the next night, take a shortcut through a neighbor's yard, and crash at a friend's house 2 towns over. She made me promise I wouldn't ruin it. I told her I heard her. Then I called Mallory. Mallory was clear I couldn't hide a runaway, even if it was for safety. But I could report what I knew. That same night, I called the state's child protection hotline and left an anonymous tip. I mentioned isolation punishment, locked doors, and the plan to flee. I didn't use names, but I gave the address. It was enough. By 9 a.m., the next morning, Child Protective Services showed up at Lenora's front door unannounced. I didn't see it happen, but a neighbor recorded some of it from across the street. Lenora was shouting on her porch, accusing me of everything. Called me that brat loud enough for the agent to tell her to lower her voice. They found Lena in her room, pretending to be asleep. When they asked to inspect the garage, she acted confused, said she hadn't been in there for weeks. But when the agents opened it, they found a blanket, an empty granola bar wrapper, and a half-drunk bottle of water hidden behind the tool shelf. There were scuff marks on the inside of the door, like someone had tried to scratch it open. At first, Lena stuck to her story. She said the stuff was old and probably from one of her brothers. But after a few hours of questioning, and a talk with a child psychologist they brought in, she admitted she didn't feel safe at home anymore. She begged not to be separated from her little brother Miles, who's only 8, said he didn't understand why things kept getting worse, and she was the only one who helped him with schoolwork. That afternoon, both Lena and Miles were placed in emergency foster care. They were kept together with a temporary caregiver who had experience handling sibling cases. The guardian ad litem was notified and added their statements to the main case. Lenora, of course, fired back. She tried to file an official complaint against me with Child Protective Services, claiming I was harassing her, manipulating her children, and making false reports to steal her kids. It was dismissed almost immediately. There was no evidence, and by now, the pattern was obvious. That same week, I got a message through my college email. It was sent anonymously through a temporary email account. The person said they used to work with Lenora at a daycare center a few years ago. They didn't leave their name, but the details matched records I already had. They wrote that Lenora burned through babysitters and once left a toddler at the center for over 13 hours. Claimed she would yell at kids in the back hallway, away from cameras. Said several employees had reported her, but the management wanted to avoid drama, so nothing came of it. I forwarded the email to Mallory. She asked the contact for a signed affidavit, and surprisingly, they agreed. They typed it up, got it notarized at a UPS store, and sent it in. It was added to our case file as supporting evidence for a pattern of neglect beyond just family. Meanwhile, Callie had a good week. She aced her spelling test, 10 out of 10. Her therapist said she was starting to show emotional opening, like she wasn't always in survival mode. Callie told her she wanted to paint a rainbow wall in our apartment. She picked out color samples from the hardware store and taped them to the wall beside her bunk bed. She said the wall would be for good dreams only. I started keeping a journal, not just for the case, but for myself. Every time something happened, good or bad, I wrote it down. There was a page from the night I snuck crackers to Callie before bed because she was scared to ask for snacks. Another page had the list of books we borrowed from the library. One entry was just a line, today, no yelling. The guardian ad litem scheduled a sibling visit. Lena and Miles met Callie at the agency's office. No toys, just a basic room with chairs and coloring sheets. Callie ran to Lena the moment she saw her. Didn't let go the whole hour. Miles gave her a homemade card that said "Miss you lots." They sat together drawing while the social worker took notes. At the end of the visit, Callie wouldn't stop waving until they were out of sight. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the court. The final custody hearing was scheduled for next month. The judge would decide where Callie would stay permanently, and possibly Lena and Miles too. The final custody hearing took place on a Tuesday morning. The courtroom was packed. Lenora showed up first, dressed like she was hosting a political fundraiser. Pale blue suit, hair curled into stiff waves, and heels that echoed every step. She brought her church pastor, 2 neighbors I didn't recognize, and carried a folder too thin to hold anything real. Her lawyer walked beside her, talking fast and loud. I came in next with Mallory, the guardian ad litem, MS. Phelps, my old English teacher, and 2 women who used to babysit for Lenora years ago. They were nervous but agreed to testify when Mallory explained what was at stake. The babysitters went first. One of them described being paid cash to avoid paperwork. Said Lenora asked her to ignore the kids when they cried and only step in if something broke. The other one got choked up while telling the court how she once found Miles locked in the basement after wetting the bed. She had quit the same day and reported it to management at the daycare where Lenora used to drop the kids off, but nothing came of it. Next, Callie's therapist submitted a written statement. The judge read parts of it aloud. It confirmed that Callie had experienced developmental delays linked to prolonged emotional trauma. Since moving in with me, she was catching up, sleeping better, eating full meals, speaking with more confidence, and showing signs of secure attachment. The therapist called it the start of true emotional recovery. Then came the guardian ad litem's recommendation. It was firm. She told the court that, based on all interviews, home visits, and documentation, Callie should remain permanently in my care. She added that the same environment had also helped Lena and Miles during their temporary placement, and suggested a 6-month kinship care trial for them too. Lenora's lawyer tried to push back. His angle was that Lenora was a misunderstood single mother who had done her best under hard circumstances. But when asked for documentation, school reports, medical records, anything showing stable care, he had almost nothing. The neighbors she brought said vague things like she loves her children and she brings them to church sometimes, but nothing specific. Mallory countered with a new set of text messages we had pulled with a court order. These were time-stamped and came directly from Lenora's phone provider. The messages included phrases like "you're just house trash" and "stop leeching off me like your deadbeat cousin." The judge stared at the printouts for a full minute without speaking. A court-appointed psychologist testified next. She explained the way Callie and Lena had reacted to Lenora's presence during supervised visits. Flinching, freezing, or shutting down were classic signs of emotional conditioning rooted in long-term fear. She used the phrase trauma-bonded but terrified. When Lenora got the chance to speak, she tried changing her whole approach. Claimed I was only doing all of this to feel important, or that I just wanted attention and was desperate to play savior. I didn't raise my voice. I just said one line. If I wanted to be seen, I wouldn't have spent 12 years invisible in that house. The courtroom went still. The judge asked everyone to step out while he reviewed everything in chambers. We waited in the hallway for about 15 minutes. Callie colored in a notebook beside me. A mess. Phelps sat on the bench with her eyes closed. Mallory double-checked her notes, calm as always. When we were called back in, the judge read the verdict without build-up. Callie's custody was permanently transferred to me, effective immediately. I was granted full legal guardianship with no visitation rights granted to Lenora. For Lena and Miles, the court approved a 6-month kinship care trial under observation. The guardian ad litem would continue scheduled visits, and the foster center would remain involved to ensure transition support. Lenora stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. She started yelling about clout and stolen family and how the system was rigged by bitter kids. She had to be escorted out by security. The judge didn't flinch once. That evening, I went to pick up Callie, Lena, and Miles from the foster center. Lena was quiet the whole time until we got outside. Then she stopped on the steps, looked at me, and whispered, "You actually did it." She hugged me without waiting for a reply. Back at the apartment, we didn't have enough chairs for everyone, so we sat on the floor. Microwave mac and cheese, juice boxes, and a playlist of old cartoons. Miles spilled his drink twice. Callie asked if they could paint the rainbow wall this weekend. Lena put a pillow on the floor and called it the chat zone. No furniture yet. But all three of them were laughing. 3 months after the custody hearing, we moved into a new apartment. 2 bedrooms, slightly bigger kitchen, and a balcony that overlooks a bus stop. Nothing fancy, but it felt like progress. We all helped pack. Callie used color-coded stickers for the boxes. Lena played DJ and made a playlist called Escape Room to Real Room. Miles got distracted and packed a shoe, a banana, and 1 sock in a cereal box. The new place felt different right away. Less echoes. More light. The state approved a kinship caregiver stipend after Mallory walked me through the paperwork. It wasn't huge, but enough to cover part-time childcare so I could stay in school. I adjusted my class schedule to take evening courses and picked up weekend hours at the bookstore. I also started using a meal planning app, because 3 growing kids can wipe out a pantry faster than I ever imagined. Callie stopped jumping every time the phone rang. Now she runs to it yelling, "It's probably the pizza guy," even when it's just my study buddy calling about flashcards. She sleeps with her nightlight on and her socks off. For the first time in her life, she chooses those things herself. Lena stayed guarded for a while. She kept a hoodie on even inside and barely talked unless it was about homework or dinner. Then one night, I found a notebook on the edge of the couch. Inside were poems. Some rhymed, some didn't. All of them were raw and sharp and honest. She didn't say anything when she caught me reading, but the next day she asked if I could help her find a poetry club at school. 2 weeks later, she performed at her first open mic. Miles has a routine now. 2 stories, a glass of water, hugs from all 3 of us, in order, Callie, Lena, then me. One night he looked at me and asked if he could call me Big Sister Mom. He says it like 1 word. I didn't correct him. A few weeks ago, the court approved an extension of guardianship for Lena and Miles. The social worker's review used words like stable, nurturing, and bonded. It was the first time I've ever seen those words written about a home I was part of. Lenora tried to appeal the ruling once. She didn't even show up to the hearing. The judge refused to reopen anything. Her case was closed with prejudice. I heard from a former neighbor that she's living alone now, sold one of her cars, and hasn't had a job since losing her home childcare license. She hasn't reached out. She can't. She's still blocked, and the court order stands. There was no joy in hearing that. I thought there would be. But instead, I felt empty, like someone hit pause and forgot to press play again. I started seeing a therapist. Not court-mandated, not for documentation, just for me. In one session, I was asked what I liked doing, not what I had to do, not what I was good at, just what I liked. I didn't have an answer. I started writing it out. My journal went from task lists and custody notes to small joys. A list of places I want to take the kids. Ideas for a tiny herb garden on the balcony. Applications for transfer to a university next fall. Mayad fab all. I started making plans for something that didn't begin with survival. One afternoon, MS, Phelps called. A local youth advocacy nonprofit was hosting a panel and wanted a speaker who had been through the system. She had told them about me. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. At the event, I didn't read from notes. I told the truth. That no one came to save me. That I made it far enough to turn around and pull someone else out. A woman on the panel, a program director from a university, asked to speak with me after. She offered to help mentor me through the application process for their social work program. 2 weeks later, I got a letter with a scholarship offer attached. I accepted. The last Sunday of the month, we stayed home. No court dates, no forms, no appointments, just pancakes. Miles added too many chocolate chips. Callie wore one of my old hoodies like a dress and kept dropping batter on her sleeves. Lena argued about whether syrup counts as a wet topping. I didn't clean the kitchen right away. I just watched them. For the first time in years, I wasn't checking windows or bracing for someone to walk through the door angry. I wasn't planning an escape. I wasn't invisible. I was here, and they were here with me, laughing over pancakes. We were never saved by the system. We saved each other, and we're staying.